You are feeding off the violence and the despair of the drug trade. You're stealing from those who themselves are stealing the lifeblood from our city. You are a parasite who leeches off
just like you,
the culture of drugs. Excuse me? What?
I got the shotgun. You got the briefcase. It's on the game, though, right?
It's all in the game. Can you believe it was 20 years ago this week that we met those classic characters from The Wire? So many of us were outright captivated by the HBO series, which would, of course, become a cult classic. But The Wire really did also offer keen insight into inner city life, from the streets to the ports, from local politics to the public election system, and so much more. And it also blessed us with a very young Michael B. Jordan and the amazing Stringer Bell, a.k.a. Idris Elba. But today, let's focus on the substance and all the ways The Wire not only influenced television, but really policy as well. Joining me for this conversation this AM, I'm very pleased to say, are David Simon, the creator of The Wire and executive producer of the new HBO series that I'm so into, We Own This City, and the awesome and handsome Wendell Pierce, who I begged and I'm so thrilled to have on the show, who played fan favorite Detective Bunk Moreland on The Wire. He will also be on Broadway this summer in the classic play Death of a Salesman. So happy to have both you gentlemen here. And just kudos on a brilliant body of work that you did. David, I want to start with you. I'm just curious, what did you intend The Wire to teach us about inner city life?
I think, not speaking to theme, because there were several themes to the show, but speaking, if it had a political message, if it had a political argument, it was that we need to end the drug war. The drug war has not only destroyed communities and families and people, and mass incarceration is a great drain on society, but it's also actually destroyed law enforcement. It's turned what is supposed to be the mission of law enforcement, which is to respond to those things which harm people directly, meaning people who commit crimes against other people. It's destroyed that ability in my city and elsewhere to actually achieve any results there. While drug arrests go up, the actual clearance rate, the arrest rates for all major felonies collapse. So it was actually destroying police work itself, apart from everything else it was doing damage to. That was the message. And I'm sorry to say, I don't think it's had a sufficient amount of influence, because here we are 20 years later.
Yeah, and you had a very unique view of all of this, a fellow journalist, having bore witness to this and reported on these issues. And I think We Own the City definitely takes a different look through the lens of police brutality, which is so brilliantly done. I want to bring Bunk, Wendell Pierce, into the conversation. Yes. Wendell, just... I'm a huge fan of yours, and just your portrayal of Detective Bunk Moreland was so wonderfully, brilliantly done. I want to play a scene between you and Michael K. Williams, R.I.P., who played Omar, because so much of what you said still resonates today. Take a listen, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
But I know you remember the neighborhood, how it was. We had some bad boys for real. It wasn't about guns so much as knowing what to do with your hands. Those boys could really rack. My father had me on the straight. But like any young man, I wanted to be hard too. So I would turn up at all the house parties where the tough boys hung. They knew I wasn't one of them. Hard cases would come up to me and say, "Go home, schoolboy, you don't belong here."
Oh, Wendell, that scene, it just still resonates. And so many of us, we know the people you're talking about. David, you wrote about it for the Baltimore Sun. Wendell, so many of us who lived that life, we knew the people on the corner who were saying, get out of here, go home, go to school, be a good guy, and didn't know what they were doing. Just tell me how you reflect on playing that character 20 years ago and just what we are seeing playing out in society in the 2 decades since.
Well, that scene is one of my finest hours. It was one of the highlights of the entire series for me. First to work with Michael, and then also to just capture what so many of the African-American officers that I did my research with it drove them to become law enforcement, which was to make sure that their community of the Miss Anns and Miss Joes and all was duly protected, and also the criminality that was happening in the neighborhood was not reflective of 99% of the people that were there. And so I wanted to depict that, and I was so happy that George Pelecanos, one of the writers, was hearing me talk about this, because I was complaining that I only had one thing to do in this one season, and he said, Wendell is going to lead you to Omar. And he took some of the research and the stories that I learned from people like the real Bunk, Oscar Requer, on the Baltimore Police Department, Black officers who wanted to uplift their Black community.
Well, just bravo to you, because this was just a really amazing work, and of course to the writers. David, one thing I find interesting is you actually used people in this series who were real live people from the area of Baltimore. What led to that decision, and through the creative process, why was that important to make it as authentic as possible, using people who weren't necessarily classically trained actors?
Well, the world looks a little more real when you use the real, and there was a little delicate inside joke if you were Baltimorean, as I am. So to have, say, the mayor, the former mayor who had been one of the first in America to argue for a rationalization of the drug war, for decriminalization, Kurt Schmoke, to have him play the health commissioner and tell his fictional self, you start talking like that, you'll be one of the most dangerous people in America. That's only fun. That's only us having fun. And you can get away with this if you ask them to basically play a character very much like themselves and to not look at the camera, and you give them a few takes. People can be pretty good. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean they're ready to give them a SAG card and give them a full story arc with a love life, and a little bit goes a long way, but you can do it. And it was a nod to the real in Baltimore. I'm glad that a lot of faces of people, some of whom aren't with us anymore, are embedded in the piece. In some way speaks to the Baltimore I knew and that Ed Burns policed, and that, it's just something. It's just something a little inside.
And, I remember, I can't remember the season, but I remember Governor Ehrlich played, I think, a security guard on the show. So I think for those of us in the Beltway area, we recognized a lot of those characters.
Well, that, to be fair, he did. He was game. We offered a similar role that we thought was a little bit charming. We made the governor a trooper at the State House. We offered the same thing to Marty O'Malley, the mayor at the time, who was running against Ehrlich.
Yeah.
He declined. So we were nonpartisan in that moment.